Welcome back. This week we've got an upgrade to our snowball catapult. We've made some revisions and some improvements. Namely, we added 608 skater bearings in place of the print and place bearings. We did a few other things. We added different locations for the spring pin so we can adjust launch angle and the amount of energy stored in the springs when we cock it. And then we've also swapped our springs to PETG. This material just makes a much better spring. It doesn't wear out as quickly. We've had much better results with it, and the springs last way longer. We increased the engagement here and made a few other tweaks that just make the whole thing stay together better and really just work better as a catapult. So we're going to go through design and then build plate setup, and at the end we'll do assembly. Let's take a look at the function of this thing. We've got these big spiral springs. These are the power plant for the catapult. So when we move the arm backwards like this, we charge those springs. We get to the point where the trigger can go into this notch and it'll fall in here, and then we can let go of the arm, and this roller will sit on this face and keep the arm from coming forward. So that's a temporary lock until we move the trigger. When we push down on this finger pad and we rotate out of the way, as soon as we get out past this point, the arm's going to come forward and the springs are going to propel it all the way until we get to where it started. So once the springs have delivered all of their energy, then the momentum of this is going to bend the spring in the other way, and we're going to start to load it again, and that slows the arm down. So that's what sets the launch angle. Now we have these 5 holes, and we can move this pin so that we can very easily adjust launch angle rather than trying to pull this socket off and adjust it every time, because that was kind of tricky. We've also added some knockout holes so that when we want to get this apart, we can. In the event that you do want to take it apart, it was really difficult before with them all being blind. We've added these 608 skater bearings. They're really common bearings and really inexpensive. And we got rid of the print and place bearings that caused some problems for people printing on textured build plates. They tended to fuse, you had to break them apart. They weren't as perfect. And we always print on a flat build plate, so we didn't even experience it ourselves. We've got this kind of T-slot connection. It's an interference fit so that we can put the bucket onto the arm, and that allows us to print both pieces with no support. And then we pivot on a hex pin for the trigger. The trigger has half a pin coming from either side, and that's what allows us to roll in here. And then we've got the gears in the front. So the arm has a giant gear going around it, and it turns this smaller gear that turns a hex shaft, and that's what spins these springs. So the springs on bearings on either side, and when we crank this back, the small gear spins, and that's what turns the spring. And then when we disconnect the trigger, the springs turn the shaft back, the little gear propels the big gear, and that's what throws it. So we want to be sitting on a flat surface, ideally. If you hold it, you have a little bit more trouble with the trigger resetting, but it's designed to be horizontal, and there's more material on this side of the pivot than there is on this side, and gravity will rotate this thing back. There's no spring on the trigger. We're just relying on gravity. It works by itself as printed, but we did put a hole up here for a 6mm pin, and because that's so much denser than the plastic, we get a lot more mass away from the pivot, and it's a much more positive, basically gravity has a better effect on it. It moves into place quicker and a little bit more satisfyingly. So next we'll take a look at build plate setup, and then we'll move on to assembly. Here's the build plate setup. We've got it set up in 2 different plates for 2 different colors. So we'll start with the blue first. We've got the arm just laying on the side. It's basically a 2D part. So either side's fine, and this will print well. Both sides we want the outside facing down. So we want this post facing up and the socket on this one facing up. The bottoms of these holes are angled so that we could print them with no support. The hex pins all want to be on a flat side, laying sideways. Don't print them on the end. They're likely to tip over and they won't be as strong. They're printed this way so that the filament prints in this direction and gives us natural strength. The rollers we want to put on their side and just face the hole up on all 3 rollers, both spacers and the trigger roller. Now for the other plate. We've got 2 more hex pins, so lay them on their side again. The little gear we want to put on one of its sides and face the socket up. And that will let us print the teeth and the socket itself. And we've chamfered these teeth, but we could print that overhang. So no support on that guy. The trigger looks like this. We want to put it on its outside so that this arm with the pin on it is down, and that will allow us to print all of our geometry with no support. The other side of the trigger, we want to face this kind of square post up, and this weird seam is to hide the seam. It's a place for the loops to start and end, and the little vestige that it creates there we sunk below the surface so that it won't interfere with anything. There's one in this corner as well, in the socket, for the same reason. That's where the slicer will naturally hide the seam. And the last piece is the bucket itself. So there's kind of this L shape on both sides. We want to put that flat on the bed. And then everything's designed so that we could print it as overhangs with no support. And that way we get nice geometry that actually fits together, and we get to use printer accuracy to our advantage. So that's it. We printed it in 2 colors, so we just did 2 separate prints. It will all fit on one build plate. That's up to you, but you can move these parts around. Definitely face them this way though, otherwise you're going to fill up with support potentially. So next we'll look at assembly. Here are all of our parts that we should have printed and our bearings. Step 1, we're going to put bearings in the arm. So 2 bearings go in here, 1 from each side, and we're just going to push them down until they're flush. So we're going to go over to the press. So if we just kind of rest this in here, when we make contact, we kind of square it and then push it down so that it's flush here. And then flip it over. Same thing from the other side. Get it flat, push it down flush. We should look like this now, and we should rotate nice and freely. Next, we're going to put the bucket on. So we want this hook to face the opposite way of the basket. So this will face up and this will face down. We're just going to line up this T slot with the arm and then center it this way. It should stay in place. So now that that's assembled, we can just put it aside. We're going to put a bearing in each side, coming from the outside, and push them down flush. So we're going to use the press for this again. Same thing. We're going to put it down like this, get our bearing in there, straighten it out, and push it down flush. So there we go. That bearing's in there the way that we want it. Now, we need the shortest pin, the blue one, not the white ones. And we're just going to push this down in the star hole. And it's a tight fit. Push it all the way down to the bottom. And then the boom loads right over this hex pin and just sits down like this. Whoops. Faces the other way. So we want the basket away from the bearing in the front. The long pin goes in this bearing. And then we have 2 spacers and a gear. So a spacer goes on first, then the gear. And this is a little bit of a tight fit. And then the last spacer drops on over that. Next is the trigger. We've got the small blue roller. So that loads over this pin. And then we have the other side. We've got this square post that goes in this square hole, and the other side of the pin that goes in the roller. So we'll line all of that up and then give it a squeeze. And you should get a nice satisfying, creaking and snap sound. And this roller should spin nice and freely. So we'll take our last pin. This is the medium length, and that goes in this hole. Whoops. Like so. And then the trigger, well, first we've got to put our pin in. So we'll take this back over to the press and install this pin up here. This isn't necessary. It'll work without it, but it makes the trigger a little bit more positive. It rotates faster. So over here, we're going to line up our pin. We're just going to push straight down with the press. So we want the pin nice and flush. It's going to be below flush on the other side because our pin's a little bit short, but it can't stick out. And then the trigger itself goes right over this pin. And you should be able to rotate the arm backwards and get the trigger to engage. And then move it all the way out of the way. And this should spin freely. So we'll just put it down and engage the trigger. And we're going to take the other side. We've got to get this hole lined up with this pin. We need to get the pin with the gear through the other bearing and the trigger pivot pin in here. And this post is going to go in the front. This pin's an interference and this is an interference, so that's where we're squeezing it together. So we'll get everything lined up. Make sure the pins are in the right holes, and then you want to squeeze here and here and just squeeze it down till it stops. You want to kind of center this pin so it sticks out equally on either side. We've got the white pins, and we're going to start in the middle. So we've got 5 holes here we can choose from, and that will let us change launch angle. But we're going to stick it in here and stick one in the other side. Then we're going to disconnect our trigger, and we want the arm about vertical when we put the springs on. So the springs, there's one for each side. They are different. So we want them to look like this. And we put the hex on and put it over the pin. And then we're going to hold it in the same place and do the same thing on the other side. And there we go. So now, when we crank this back, we tighten our springs and our trigger falls into place. And when we fire it, the spring actually stops it here, and that's where it fires. So as we change the location of this pin, we can change the launch angle and how hard it throws. So that's it. We're together now, and we can go throw some things.